Greetings, Poe fans. Welcome to another edition of Poe Unplugged. I am Carmen Bolden.
And I am Jeanie Smith, and we are
The Poetastic Two.
Come zoom with us into the Unbook Club dedicated to the works of Mr. Edgar Allan Poe.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to Poe Unplugged. And we want to welcome Chris back again as our special guest.
Hi, Chris.
Hi.
And so we're going to discuss the oval portrait tonight. Micah already put in the chat, hey, everyone, I'm getting ready for my close-up show, but I'm listening. Thank you, Unplugged, as always, for doing this. I love when Micah does that with his words. So very cool. So who would like to start off the discussion about the oval portrait?
Well, before we get into the story itself, I'd like to say a little something.
Yeah.
Of course, I wrote my doctoral dissertation about Dan Curtis, but I wrote my master's thesis about Canadian author William Edward Daniel Ross, whom you may know as Marilyn Ross, Clarissa Ross. He wrote 358 novels under 21 different pseudonyms.
Wow.
Many of them, he wrote the Dark Shadows novels. That's where you know him. He used his wife, Marilyn Ross's name. But he also wrote historical romances, mysteries, westerns, nurse novels, spy novels, a few vampire novels. But he often in his historical novels used real life characters who would interact with his fictitious characters. He used Charles Dickens, Beau Brummel, Rasputin, Wild Bill Hickok, Cole Porter, Fatty Arbuckle. And he wrote one novel, I think for Avon Books, under his pen name Dana Ross, called The Raven and the Phantom. And it involves Edgar Allan Poe, who was a friend of the family that the heroine, becomes entangled with over the course of years. And so there's a lot of background information about Poe in the novel, and Poe himself appears and interacts and helps solve the mystery, the phantom killer who keeps striking. And the mystery ties into his short story, The Oval Portrait. So if you ever run across that novel in a used bookstore, The Raven and the Phantom by Dana Ross, be sure and get that one, because it's one of Dan Ross's best, and it's one of the four that I wrote about in my master's thesis about Ross, which was his use of actual persons and places in his historical novels. So I've always known about the oval portrait and been fascinated by it, and was thrilled that Dan Ross used it in his story, in his novel. So now I want to hear what everybody else has to say about the oval portrait.
Yeah, Jeff, thank you for sharing that. I'm writing this down so I can look that up. So
yeah, it sounds very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, this is kind of a weird take on it. So we all know the story. We kind of know, like, the painter, paints this portrait of his wife. But I kind of view it as this kind of, like, weird, like, dark romance kind of vibe to me. Like, he loved her so much that he wanted to get everything exactly perfect. So it was like she was alive. And she loved him so much that she wanted to be this perfect model for him. And even though she was getting sick, and, like, her health was failing her, she wouldn't say to him, like, hey, we need to leave this dark, creepy tower. I'm not doing well. I don't feel well, because I love you so much. I want you to be happy, and I want to give you this piece of art. And he wanted to give it to her. And at the end, it was kind of like the whole, like, Romeo and Juliet thing. To me, the only thing that would have even made it better is if he died at the end.
That would have been a different spin.
Yeah, to me, it was just kind of like this weird kind of, like, obsessive, dark romance, like that kind of passion that I think, we all hope maybe we get even, like, a little taste of in our lives. So to me, I thought it was kind of like a hot little dark romance story for me personally.
Yeah. Will added, what's more tragic about the girl's fate is that her husband will love the literal image of her more than the real person. Yes.
Wow, that's great. Well, yeah.
And to
That
me,
really
that kind of
is.
fits with what goes on in most relationships is, we all have this fantasy of the perfect soulmate, and we want to capture and, meet them and be a part of them. And so I think what, Poe wrote about in the Oval Portrait was how this man was so obsessed with the perfect rendition of what he had made up in his mind for this mate, that what many of us, he had it, but he lost it basically because he couldn't see in the essence of the things, couldn't see past the nose on his face kind of thing.
Yeah.
So obsessed.
Yeah, he
So
wasn't living in the moment. Like, right? He wasn't
exactly.
able to be in the moment. Like a lot of us are, especially today with technology. Like we're on our phones. We're never in the moment. We're not seeing what's real.
True.
Yeah.
And it ties in some ways to, I'm going to tie this back into like Greek mythology times, very narcissistic. How Narcissus was so obsessed with his picture, his face in, the pond that, or lake or whatever body of water, I can't remember. So, but he could, he got so obsessed with it that he forgot the whole world around him. And so when I was rereading it, that's what I kept thinking. I'm like, oh, look, it's another narcissistic behavior. So, all right, Chris, lay on us.
Well, and I was going to ask Chris a question real quick. So it was originally titled Life and Death, that Poe wrote it in 1842 and then edited, and then the new title in 1845, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so one of the things that I did with the research I did is I can't remember exactly which website it was, but it alluded to the fact that Poe took out several hundred words for the new edition.
Well, he actually improved it a little bit.
Okay.
The first version was pretty good, but you see it alluded to that he's got a fever, he's sick, he's injured at the beginning. This is the narrator. And then he starts to see things and imagine things. And at first he sees the portrait, imagines that it's a real person. He says, oh, there's a frame around it, so it's not a real person. But in the original version, it explained that he'd been doing opium. They explain, oh, if you do a little bit too much opium, you start to see things. So it's a little bit too literal. He just spells it out. Oh, yeah, this guy's doing opium, so he's likely to maybe have hallucinations. That kind of explains it. So he took out about a paragraph just explaining that part. And I think that improved it quite a bit there. And there's little bits here and there that he took out. Mostly he just cut out pieces. And I think the best part he cut out was right at the very end. When you get to this part, in the final version, he looks at the perfect portrait. He says, "This is life itself." And then he turned to her and she was dead. And then in the first version, it said, "But is it truly death?" And you didn't need that part. It's like, at the end of a movie where they say the end and then put a question mark at the beginning.
Yeah.
Really punctuated it. You're the one who can ask that question. Is it truly death? Instead, the narrator's asking this, and it's better without that extra word there. Just like it's better without the opium, and we can start to imagine more. And he sort of makes it more of a realistic story about an artist obsessed with his art this way. And when I read it, I always think about this: an artist who's focused on his work at the expense of all else, and his ultimate goal is to make the most lifelike portrait ever. And he slaves away at this portrait. And I'm thinking about Poe at this time. It's 1842. This is spring of 1842. And look at his stories right before this. You got, what's that one? Eleonora, about the happy couple, the cousins and love, and living with the aunt and running through the grass together. But then she dies, and she's able to come back, and even though he falls in love again, she wishes him well and everything. So it's kind of sort of a happy ending, and then follow this up with 3 Sundays in a week. Now they're two cousins, young cousins in love, but their curmudgeonly uncle won't let them be together unless they finally find a day when there's 3 Sundays in a week. And you think, wow, so much is going on here. And about this time, maybe he's also written Eulalie. I dwelt alone in a world of moan, and my soul was a stagnant tide until the fair-haired young Eulalie became my blushing bride. Or at least he was probably working on it by then, because he finished it, I think, the following year. But then, so that's 1841, then 1842 comes along, and that's when Virginia had her episode. She started coughing up blood, and they realized, wow, things were just going my way. I'd gotten this cool job at Graham's magazine. I finally started making a steady income. I'm able to move out of that tenement into a nicer house. I got Virginia a piano and a harp, and everything's going our way. And now she's got a death sentence on her head. She's coughing up blood, and then right after this, we get these back-to-back stories like the Mask of the Red Death, like and darkness, decay, and the Red Death held illimitable dominion over all. You just can't escape death no matter what you try. And here he is. He's watched so many people in his life, his mother, his foster mother, his brother, all dying of tuberculosis, and here's another one. And then the oval portrait. And it almost seems like there's a little bit of guilt in this one too. This is an artist who, just like Poe, he'd given up everything, given up living in nice, comfortable surroundings with Allen's. He could have maybe taken over Allen's business, played by the rules, done the right thing. Instead, he just had this dream. He said, I know I'm a poet, and no one who worships beauty the way I do couldn't be a poet. He has to be a poet. He has to be a writer. And he'd given up a lot to do that. And now he's got Virginia and Mariah dependent upon him. They need him. And for years, when they got to Philadelphia, they were living in a place that sounded like it's about to fall down on top of them. It's so bad. But now things are finally starting to pay off. He's got the job at Graham's. Things are looking up. And then she gets sick. And here we got this story about an artist who's so focused on his art that he doesn't notice that his wife is dying there. She's posing, and she's devotedly sitting there posing patiently, and she's enduring this suffering in silence. She doesn't say, oh, I got to get up, I'm dying, but she just sits there and she devotes herself to helping him with this. And then when he finally gets that portrait right, he says, this is life itself. That's when you get that big old twist ending. Absolutely. And maybe that's a little bit what Poe's going through there. Maybe if I hadn't left the Southern Literary Messenger, maybe if I'd stayed in Richmond and Mariah had bought that boarding house she wanted to, and we would have had a steady income, maybe Virginia be healthy now. And there's really no way of knowing what was going through his head. And it's often a bad idea to look at the short stories and try to find out what's going on in Poe's mind, because usually it's more the poetry seems more autobiographical than the short stories. But here it just seems to fit right with what's going on. And Poe doesn't really tell you what to think or anything. He just ends it with that line, she was dead.
And especially at the very early parts of when the narrator is reading from the booklet what's going on with the painting and everything, and it talks about how the woman said that after they got married that she felt like the art was the mistress, or that she was competing with the art, and that's one of the reasons why she was devoting herself so much to sitting for this, because she was hoping, it's like he was portraying that she was hoping that he would see her, in reality, and then she could finally get rid of, that mistress or that, second person in their marriage, and finally enjoy being married and have love and life. And it just didn't turn out that way.
It's almost like the art killed her.
Exactly.
It truly
was.
Yeah, even before he was painting her, he was painting everything else as well and not
Mhm.
focusing on his bride. Yeah,
What's
definitely.
And I
even
guess a year later,
sadder,
he decided, I'm going to give this up and go work in the government. I want a customs house job.
Yeah.
This isn't working.
yeah. And to me, the thing that's even more sad about it is that she knew that she couldn't compete, but
Hmm.
she tried everything she could, and bring it around to the day, things about today and things that we think of and what we do and what we try to keep the attention of that person that we want to love us and to see us, and the things that people will do to try to make that happen. I mean, in
Hmm.
essence, you know, that's kind of the same thing if we're looking at it in today's times, is what that she did by sitting there and killing herself to try to make him notice her.
Yeah.
So it's the correlations that even in today's society, that the reality of having to fight someone else's obsession, whether it be art, whether it be like addiction of any kind, can and Chris, you're talking about how he started out in the first version talking about opium and everything and how that was big in that time, and but he took that out for the second one, which I think that was really good.
Yeah.
Because to me, one of the things I like about Poe is he does leave the open ended for the readers to fill in. So
Interpretation. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
but
like
Uh,
I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
I just think for me, like at the end, like Chris said, like I didn't know about the opium in the original one, but how it ended for me, it kind of had like a supernatural type sense. Like, is her soul in this portrait now? Which
Hmm.
I know, the picture of Dorian Gray came after this, but it kind of gave me that idea of like, is she in there? And then with the movies that spawned off of that, like this idea that is she real? Is she like like the line that was cut? Is she really dead, or is there something more to this picture? Is she actually like, is she the picture now? She
Yeah.
gave her life for that picture, and maybe she's haunting it. I don't know. So I do like the idea that has kind of like for me, like a supernatural kind of vibe at the end.
And
Yeah.
I believe Oscar Wilde did read this story and comment that he
Mm-hmm.
liked it.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I enjoyed because, well, I won't use the word enjoyed, but I understood that from certain points when he was doing the painting, that when he would look at her, that the paintbrush was literally pulling her essence and her colors and everything, and that's what he was using for the paint. And that's how he and she ended up letting it happen, but he killed her by painting the perfect picture of the person that he had right in front of him,
Yeah.
by taking away what made her so perfect. And it it's just sad. Every time I
Yeah.
read it, I just get sad.
it's
Yeah.
almost like an energy vampire or something.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Poe's doing a good job here. I mentioned I like that he took out, that was she really, is this really death? Because you don't
Mm-hmm.
need that part at the ends. And looks like
Hmm.
Holly was already asking the question without needing to have the question written out for her. And Poe played both sides enough that you get the feeling that maybe there is something supernatural in it without him having to spell that out.
Yeah.
Because he likes to leave that doubt. And I guess that's the good reason he took out the opium part, was because it leaves it up to your imagination. Was this portrait really so lifelike that when he saw it, it looked like a person standing there? With the opium, you say, oh, that's just the drugs. But here you got, is the power of the portrait itself? Is it his imagination?
Hmm.
Is it the way that the candlelight hit it just right? So it really makes it more effective making those cuts.
Yeah, and adds that spooky factor in as well. I also kind of went to looking at. I've read the picture of Dorian Gray a few times, and I kind of did some more research about that too. And one of the things that was brought up in one of the articles I read was questioning the character of Sybil Vane, who Dorian, becomes obsessed with. She becomes obsessed with him and takes her own life because of Dorian, and when he starts ignoring her and shunning her. And is Sybil Vane the embodiment in Wilde's book, the wife of the artist from Poe's work, like kind of, paying homage or something like that? I just thought that was a really interesting theory to kind of correlate between the two. I don't know. Any thoughts on that? Because they're like, to me, Wilde's work is so complimentary of Poe's.
Yeah, you could see oval portrait in there. Also, William Wilson, these idea of doubles and what's the image and what's the reality.
Yeah. It's really
and
fascinating.
Poe's really interested in the theme of doubles throughout his career, but William Wilson especially, it seems to fit really well.
Yeah, and I know Jeff, I was going to say Dark Shadows uses the portrait as well.
Right.
Yeah, I'm right in the section with Quentin, and his portrait was just burned. So
right. Yeah, that is a picture of Dorian Gray storyline on Dark Shadows.
Absolutely.
Well, if you want to bring more historical into it, that, with the development of the camera, that the Native Americans during the early days of America, when they would shy away from photography because they believed that taking the picture would be taking their soul.
Yeah.
The spirit of who they were. And I mean, that to me is just the same as whenever time I, reading the oval portrait or Dorian Gray or anything like that, is like when you recreate an image and like an idol of some sort that's supposed to be representative of something, and you're thinking to yourself, well, why would you need to recreate something when you already have it right there in front of you? And I guess that's one of the things that just kind of, and yes, it's for prosperity's sake, basically, is, people want to memorialize things that, because, nobody lives forever.
Yeah.
No matter what, what vampire that might have, or, Dorian Gray or whatever supernatural that you can add on to it, no one truly lives forever. So, but there's the memorialization in the artwork that lives on, because even memories don't live forever.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why this one, to me, out of all of Poe's, has always made me more melancholy and sad.
Yeah.
Than anything, is because it transcends so much of what we feel and what we face as, mortality. And I think that's one of the things that Poe made it a little too in your face for me in some ways. Or, this is life and she is death, But
yeah,
that's just my take on it. Sorry.
Yeah. One of the things that I was thinking of too is it's one of his short stories. And Chris, is there one that's shorter than this? Because I mean, most of them, there's a little bit more to them, and this one was just, it did kind of get right to the point in a good way, because I really do like this story. But it was like, oh, I kind of want more. I want more from the story.
And maybe Shadow or Silence, a fable. So those are two really short ones. And they're also similar to this, because Shadow is a parable and Silence is a fable, and there's that sort of unreality to them. And even in this story, we're reading a story about a guy reading a story. So there's this another distance between us and reality, and what's the real text. And And it's interesting that it is so short because it seems like a culmination of his marriage stories. We start with Berenice. It's a marriage that doesn't go well, and Morella and Ligeia and Eleonora, and here we get to another unequal marriage, which almost harkens back to Morella, where Morella and the narrator never really love each other, and she hates him, goes to despise him, and in Berenice, he's less concerned with Berenice than he is with her teeth. He's obsessed with her teeth, and then Ligeia, he loves Ligeia, but he seems like he's kind of indifferent to Rowena when she's dying. It's not quite the same as when Ligeia dies.
Yeah.
And then you got finally with Eleonora, where it seems like they're sort of on equal ground. They're coming together. There's finally this happy marriage story. And the stories are also getting shorter and less complex. Ligeia is a much longer story. And here we get a very short, very simple story, almost like a prose poem.
Yeah. That's true.
This could have been a poem if he decided to set it into verse and meter. He could have made a poem out of this, but he wasn't into those long narrative poems this time of his career.
Yeah, that's true.
I wish we could have learned what her name is. We never learn her name. And I wonder if her name would have had an L in it, as so many of his women's names do.
For some reason, he thought that didn't need to be in there.
Yeah.
Well, I think that made it more poignant, him not putting a name, because the artist himself did not give her a name, did not give her homage to that she was worthy enough for a name, I guess is what I get from it. It's right. Like, he couldn't even see her long enough to get a name.
Yeah.
Or it's almost like a fairy tale or something.
Yeah.
Or a fable or.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of a fable in a way. And I've read Shadow and Silence of Fable. It's just been a while. Like I should probably reread these after we've read this for tonight.
I guess in Silence they don't really give the people names. There's just a guy sitting on a rock, and then there's a demon.
Yeah.
That's the one I always think it's
the
a
rock
poem.
Guy.
But it's not a poem. I actually reread it recently because I wanted to do that for the ring. I was like, no, the one with the rock. And I was like, it kind of like in this one too. There's a couple of verses where they're kind of poetic and it's kind of rhymey. And yeah, I do kind of find myself thinking they're poems and they're not. Because I don't know because I know you're supposed to read poetry out loud, but I always read it to myself, and yeah, it all seems as I'm reading it to myself, it's always rhyming. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like that.
Well, just read it aloud to yourself, Holly.
Yeah,
I do. I read to my cats, and sometimes they will like listen.
Sometimes, right?
Yeah, sometimes. Any other thoughts on the story?
Well, I mean, this is going back to the Dorian Gray one. So the Picture of Dorian Gray is one of my all-time favorite novels. I absolutely adore that. So I don't want to give too much away for someone who hasn't read, because if you haven't, you have to. It's like one of the best novels ever written, in my opinion. But yeah, and ironically, right, it's his only one he ever wrote, but Oscar Wilde, that is. So, but like, going back to Sybil Vane, like, when she finds true love, she feels that she can no longer act, right? And at that point, Dorian's like, well, I only liked you because of the beauty I found in you, because you're an actress. And after that, she kind of is like, oh, well, like, I have no point in living. Kind of like once the portrait and the oval portrait is done, it's already there. That's the art form. And like now the person is no longer needed. So kind of like a little bit of a parallel between the two.
That's very true. Yeah, and I was going to say Poe has that commonality with Wilde. He only wrote one novel, the narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym, which is our May Poe Unplugged. So don't forget about that if you haven't started reading.
Oh, you got a double in that one too.
Do what now? Yes.
You got to double that when he dresses up like the dead man. So there's a double there too.
Yeah, he does have a lot of doubles, definitely.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool.
Definitely doubles.
Yeah, I think that's a neat aspect.
And also in that, there's a lot of things that aren't what they seem. You know, he thinks he's in a tomb. Oh, he's just really inside the ship. Oh, he thinks he's being attacked by this ferocious beast. Oh, it's just his dog.
Yeah, definitely. So I really like the novel, and I'm going to reread it for Poe Unplugged just so it's fresh in my brain. Any other
Yep.
thoughts for? Oh, yeah, Jeannie, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that the amount of things that he brings into his stories that have you really, thinking about the psychological aspects of everything that people go through, even with the twins, with, addiction, with whether it be art, whether it be opium, whether it be, just like Montesquieu and, all the, it's like, okay, he is really touching upon enough of people and what they feel and how they react that he wants to kind of bring it and put it in people's faces when you read it. And that's kind of what I get. It's like, oh, okay, would never thought that, we'd never think that way, but thanks, Poe. Got it. Was it just me, or am I was?
Yeah. Well, and like Jeannie, with what we were just talking about, the recording we just did with the unconscious and conscious mind that Freud went wholeheartedly in, that Poe brings that in a lot of his stories. It makes you think about that.
Yes. Yeah. It's good and it's bad, because some people don't want to see what's right in front of their face. Case in point, the oval portrait.
So. Yeah, like you said, like a fable. Live in the moment. Don't forget to live.
Yeah, kind of the moral of the story. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. One other thing I found that was really interesting was Poe references Sully in the story. Thomas Sully, who was an artist, lived from 1783 to 1872. And he has a painting called the Coleman Sisters, and there's three ladies in there. And one of the just kind of art critiques about it was that the ladies are so reminiscent of what Poe has described as some of his female characters in the story. They have raven hair. They're dressed in the period. I was going to say, Chris, I know you're an artist. You probably know more about it than I do.
Oh yeah, Thomas Sully, he's the guy who did the Andrew Jackson for the $20 bill. And during the first half of the 19th century, he was kind of like the John Singer Sargent of his day. People were going to him and he was painting presidents, and he really had a fluid liquid style, sort of like Thomas Lawrence, or a generation or two later, John Singer Sargent. And the way that Poe describes the portrait was sort of the hazy outline, and it's almost like the portrait just dissolves into mist at the bottom of the portrait. And that reminds me of Thomas Sully. That's the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts in Philadelphia. It's the actress Fanny Kimball in the role of Beatrice. And it was popular enough that they actually had an engraving made of it for the gift for 1836, which Poe was in, and Poe wrote a review of it. And he said what a great portrait this was. So I wonder if this was something like the portrait he was thinking of. It's kind of one where she just dissolves into mist at the bottom. It's just sort of a head and shoulders portrait. And I was always just fascinated with just how lifelike it is, because the pose is just so striking. She's turning her head towards you just like she's just about to speak. And I can see what impressed Poe about it. It's just one of those portraits that almost seems like it's going to pop right out of the canvas and start talking to you.
Yeah.
And that's really a difficult quality for people to get, something that's truly lifelike, because people can do something photorealistic, get every little detail perfect, but there's something special, almost magical about making it come to life. And there's only a few artists who've really been able to do that. Maybe Velasquez and Thomas Sully here.
Yep.
And it's a really sort of magical property to make colored mud come to life and seem to have a personality. And a weird story that this all reminds me of is that our old buddy Rufus Griswold, his wife died about this time in 1842.
Okay.
So about that time, and he had a portrait of her. And one of his letters that we have at the museum, he says that every morning and every night he kissed the lips on her portrait. Imagine her eyes were looking down kindly upon him. So that's old Rufus, living this stuff. So often Poe wrote about this stuff, but it looks like Griswold did it. Like
Yeah.
Poe would write, all the night tide lie down by the side of my darling, my life and my bride. And Poe wrote it. Griswold did it. He actually went to his wife's crib, hopped on in the coffin with her. So
Yeah.
it's weird how you have these little parallels there. Just probably pure coincidence because Poe probably didn't, write up Griswold and say, "Hey, Griswold, what are you doing right now?" And he says, "Oh, I'm kissing my wife's portrait." And he said, "Oh, I should write a story about that." And
Yeah,
so it probably didn't work that way. Just a big coincidence.
I always
And
thought that was really creepy about Griswold, all the stuff with his wife.
yeah,
Oh my goodness.
and it also reminds me, there's a very famous portrait of Ophelia by Sir John Everett Millais,
Mm-hmm.
and the model is Lizzie Siddall, and she soon became Dante Gabriel Rossetti's favorite model, his wife.
Mm-hmm.
And when she was posing for Ophelia, she was in a bathtub. There were candles underneath it to keep it warm, and the candles blew out. But she was such a professional model, she kept posing in the cold water, and she got really sick after that. So she really suffered to make that painting. And I don't know if it shows up if you actually see the original painting, if you can see that she really is suffering when that painting's being made. Of course, things didn't go well for her either. Rossetti started cheating on her, and she got addicted to laudanum, and she died early. They're not sure if it was an overdose or suicide. They just don't know.
Okay.
And Rossetti felt so guilty about that he actually put the poetry he'd been writing in her coffin with her and said, "It's all because I was so devoted to my art that I was ignoring my wife, and that's why she's dead now." And that's just the normal part. The weird part is that later I guess he had writer's block, and he said, "I need those poems back. There's no way I'm digging her up." So he had somebody else dig her up.
Oh
And the
wow.
legend was that when they dug her up, her hair had continued to grow, and it wrapped around the manuscripts as they pulled the manuscripts out of there.
Mm-hmm.
So they probably embellished the story just a little bit.
Oh yeah.
But that's also a little bit after Poe's time.
Okay. Yeah, but that's so Poe-esque though. I mean,
Yeah.
compared to the oval portrait. Wow.
We know that Rossetti was reading Poe, and it's about 1846. He did some
Okay.
illustrations for the Raven, little sketches he did for him.
Mm-hmm.
He also did some illustrations for Spirits of the Dead. So Rossetti was reading him, and Poe's one of the pre-Raphaelite heroes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting. I think I have seen a picture of that painting before, but yeah, it's a neat painting.
And it's just Ophelia by Sir John Everett Millais.
Okay.
And it was at the National Gallery of Art for a special show a few years back. And
Okay.
it's even more amazing in real life, but you can really get a good impression of it seeing it online or in a book or somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I've seen it online at some point because it sounds familiar. Yeah, it's there's to me this particular story, just the ideas of it, it feels like it's been redone many times in popular culture or modern day things. I'm sure if we all thought about it, we could probably think of other examples besides Dorian Gray, Dark Shadows, or something else.
Well, Chris, getting back to what you were saying about putting life into portraits, Henry James wrote a story called The Liar, and it's about a man who was known to lie, and he had his portrait painted. And when people came to look at it, they were shocked because they could tell just by looking at the painting that he was a liar, because the artist had infused, arrogance and a smirk into the picture so well that it was a painting of a liar.
Oh.
And there's a famous painting by Velasquez of the Pope. And apparently it was hanging up on the wall, and people would see it and they'd bow to it. Just on first glance, they mistake it for the real person. And there's one portrait at the Met in New York that he did that's actually just a portrait of his assistant. But it's also one of those ones that's almost so realistic that he looks like he's going to pop his head right off the canvas and talk to you.
Yeah, and then if you think about it, some of the older portraits, because they had to sit and they had to pose for such a long period of time, and they were painted by oil, but mostly they were done by pencil drawings first just to get the idea. But the talent of some of them, and we've all heard the stories that you feel the eyes following you.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, to me, the talent and just it's a little touch of supernatural if I think about it to myself, that these people had that much ability to put magic into what they did.
Yeah.
Make it so real that you felt the presence and you wanted to react as if it was a human right there, but you're like, wait, okay, that's a painting. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, I think some creepy dolls do that too, but we are not going to digress about that.
No. But what Carmen was saying earlier about how they've redone and, used the inspiration of the oval portrait to make, more pop culture. The picture that I have on there right there is actually from a 1973 movie that was written and produced and made about, it says Edgar Allan Poe's oval portrait. But I'm like, wait a minute, how can you call it Edgar Allan Poe's oval portrait when you look at the summary of the actual movie and you're like, there's really not much that's in relation. Because it takes place post Civil War, and it's about this woman and her mother who move into the house, and there's a picture, and there's actually the soul of the woman in the picture and gets possessed by the. So I'm like, maybe just the name of Poe's the oval portrait, maybe the only thing you're matching that up with, but
yeah, loosely based.
Yeah, loosely based.
I actually watched it in preparation for this because for some reason I was thinking there was a Vincent Price one out there, and my husband's like, "Yeah, no," because I'm not good at searching stuff like that. He's like, "No," so he found two, that that one you're talking about with the soldier, and then there's like a Mexican one that's supposed to be highly rated. I actually really enjoyed that movie. I was like,
Okay.
I don't know, I kind of had the suspense thing. I mean, I thought it was. I don't know, I liked it. I thought it was a good movie.
Well, I mean, I was just talking about the summary. I didn't actually watch the movie, but
yeah, I watched it.
Yeah, but the summary, like I'm saying, you've
Jeff,
seen
what'd
it,
you say?
Dr. Jeff?
You've seen it?
Yeah, I think I have it on VHS. I did see it a long time ago.
Okay.
Oh, cool. Yeah,
I thought it was, it definitely didn't have, I mean, it definitely took the story and, turned it into more like a romantic kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, I was like, oh, I can see it if you wanted to take that story and extend it. I was like, it was pretty good. I mean, I thought the acting was good. I was, I mean, you never know what you're going to get with those kind of movies. But I was like, all right, yeah, everything was pretty good. If they would have redid it in like today's movie with that like cinema, they could have made it really scary. But I liked it. So I mean, I would give it a watch. I mean, I don't watch that much TV, so I'm probably not the best person to ask if it's a good movie or not, but I liked it.
Hey, it's okay. I like some of the stuff like we were talking about earlier. Some of the stuff that's been made from the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s. They're 10 times better than some of the stuff that we have in today.
Yeah.
Because I mean, the 1934 Frankenstein is still my favorite. And even though there's no blood, there's no guts, there's no, there's nothing, but it's just great cinematography, even though it was very low budget, and great acting.
Yeah.
So,
and
I think that's one of the things. Yeah. No, but I'm just thinking that's why Poe, that a lot of people choose a lot of Poe's stuff, is because of the writing and the inspiration, and they take it and it makes them inspired to fulfill what we always lack sometimes, and what Poe offers us is a beginning, or a middle or end, or extra, or prequel, sequel, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, Jeanie, I 100% agree with you. And it's kind of it's funny. It's normally in my life, I like things to be either black or white. I don't really like gray. But when it comes to Edgar Allan Poe, it's actually what I like about him, because I'm one of those people, I don't really like, I like happy endings. So he does kind of leave it, a lot of his things, open ended. So you can kind of make it your own story, or continue it in your head after you read it. And you can give those characters maybe a happy ending, or you can, give them that bad, like that, that unhappy ending. But yeah, I think a lot of his stories kind of like cut short, when they could maybe be extended or whatnot. But I do like that about him as an author, is that he really does give his readers like control of where the story goes next.
Yeah.
Yeah, he lets them create whatever in their own mind that they want the story to have, whether it be a happy ending, justice for all, or, having a little bit of glee when you brick somebody up into a wall, Thinking about it is like, oh, well, yeah, I can see that, let me help with that. It's just, justice for, torturing a cat. Yeah, the cat gets you back. I'm going to have the cat's back. Okay. So,
well, any other last thoughts on the oval portrait?
It was always one of my favorites. I mean, I know it's short,
I like
but
it.
I've always liked it. I just like the imagery it creates. I like the idea of like the scene, like with this weird, just like the scene setting in the beginning with the narrator, of like you walk into this room, and you have all these like weird paintings and pictures. So it kind of has like a museum quality, but I just kind of think it's like such a unique, kind of just a creepy setting. And again, it doesn't necessarily have to be creepy, but it is like, I think, raining in the beginning or whatnot. But I mean, I just think just from the beginning, it kind of sets like a really good scene really, really quickly, which I think is really hard to do. Is, kind of create that mood. I think it's a moody piece, and overall, I liked it.
Yeah, Will just added, I found it creepy and very well done. I'm also a big fan of that creepy house, creepy painting genre, so I definitely found it satisfying. Yeah, absolutely.
Agreed.
Absolutely. Yeah. Anything else? Well, we want to remind everybody to read the narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket for May, and it's not the last Tuesday in May for last Tuesday for May for next month, because I was afraid with my stepdaughter getting married, we might be busy. But it's on May 21st, just to remind everybody, and we'll put that out on the website. So,
yeah, and also remember, it's, the entries for the Poet Like Poe contest is still going to be continued to May 15th, even though it's the last day of the poetry month. We're extending entries to May 15th. So get it out there to anybody that wants to enter into the contest, please.
Yes, and we've had several entries so far, so it's pretty exciting.
Yep.
And let's see.
Yeah, we really did enjoy it, Will.
Yes,
it's great.
yes. So,
Thanks
Will,
for
you
sharing.
definitely need to enter your poem. So, and if you have any other suggestions for things to read from July forward, let us know. Email us, or on if you sign up, on the Google form. I think most people I just naturally just send this out to. So, but just email us for ideas of what you might want to read and discuss. And because after Pym is the Descent into the Maelstrom. So that'll be fun for June.
Sticking with the water theme.
Do what?
I think sticking with the water themes of the oceans and
yes,
whatnot.
yes, for summer.
Yeah.
We'll go to the beach and do Poe Unplugged. Woohoo!
Yeah. But Chris, thank you so much for joining us and being our special guest. You add so much information, and it's great to have you on here to especially ask questions, and you have the knowledge.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I guess on that note,
we are.
Yeah, we are.
Poe
out. We should have everybody do it one time.
Exactly. Well, we need to try, try to get it close to getting it right. Maybe if we all do it together, we might get it right.
Yes, that's true. That's true. Cool. Does everyone want to try it?
All right. 1, 2, 3. We are
Poe out. That wasn't bad. Yay. Well, thank you everybody for joining, and we look forward to next month. I think we'll probably have a ton to talk about with that novel. So there's lots of things.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you again, Chris.
Bye.
You're welcome.